Famous actor found dead of an apparent drug overdose, but now questions over who could be held responsible for the death of Philip Seymour Hoffman. 4 people were arrested last night in New York City. Police say the suspects may have supplied the drugs that killed the Oscar-winning actor. Now, we couldn't find any evidence in New York of drug dealers being held liable for the death of a customer. In fact, some New York courts have found that under state law, drug dealers cannot be held liable for a customer's death. But nationally, the trend is very different. States are handing down harsher convictions for heroin dealers specifically. So could this be a landmark case? Let's bring in our legal panel. Anna Yum is former prosecutor, and she's joining us now. And Phil Snyder, criminal defense attorney. Great to have you both. Phil, what do you think about this? Do you think that this could happen if these drug dealers were tied to Philip Seymour Hoffman? Phil, could they be charged with something like manslaughter, third-degree murder, homicide?
What? Well, I don't think it's going to happen in this case because New York, unlike the neighboring state, Pennsylvania, has specifically said in the courts that drug dealers are not responsible for the death of one of its consumers. Now, if this case had something unique about it that might be able to change the precedent, but in this case, the synthetic material that normally is the linchpin for these cases was not even found in the initial report. So in this particular case, I do not think that they will be filing any enhanced charges such as manslaughter, although I do think they will file simple possession, possibly sale, and maybe even trafficking of the heroin.
Anna, do you agree? Disagree?
Not necessarily. I think that it's still an ongoing investigation, so a lot has to be revealed to reflect what was exactly found in these alleged drug dealers' houses and whether there's a causal link with what was found in Philip Seymour Hoffman's apartment. Now, keep in mind, drug-induced homicides, Jenna, are typically very difficult to prove because of causation. But also, a prosecutor's job is not to cherry-pick the easy cases and to run away from the difficult cases. It's to seek justice, and to seek justice based upon the evidence and what they can prove. So I think what's really going to be telling is what we can find out about this ongoing investigation and what these alleged 4 drug dealers knew about Philip Seymour Hoffman's condition and whether it amounted to criminal negligence.
You bring up a lot of great points there, Anna. While you were speaking, we actually have some news from the New York City chief medical examiner who says that Philip Seymour Hoffman's cause of death is pending further studies, which is interesting because obviously everyone right away said this is drug overdose. Certainly it looks like that according to what we know, Phil. But to Anna's point, when we look at causation in this, a drug dealer may supply the drugs to somebody, right? But they don't make that person take it. So when you're looking at some of these other cases, like you mentioned it in Pennsylvania and other cases around the country, how are prosecutors making that leap, saying that the drug dealer is responsible for somebody else's actions?
Well, it's a very difficult leap because there's a caveat emptor. You're buying heroin. You have to assume that, there's a danger element involved. From what I've read, the linchpin really is the additional drugs, the synthetic materials that are included by the drug dealer that apparently the consumer may or may not know they're ingesting. So what the prosecution in those cases say is, Mr. Consumer bought heroin, but he didn't know the synthetic material that has 100 times the potency was included in the drug. Now, again, in this case, from what has been coming out so far, that material has not even been found. And Philip Seymour Hoffman's apartment had multiple drugs, including cocaine, methamphetamines, and all these medical prescriptions. So in this case, I think that they are going to be out of luck making this landmark case that these drug dealers should be given enhanced charges such as manslaughter.
Anna, I want to turn again to that report. This coming from Reuters, the medical examiner saying, pending further studies to find the cause of death for this actor. If a drug dealer is arrested in this case, as were these 4 alleged drug dealers, what kind of charges are they facing? What kind of penalties or punishment would they face?
Well, I think that they're facing possession and distribution and possibly possession of paraphernalia. And of course, if you can make that causal link between criminal negligence and if they acted recklessly to have caused Philip Seymour Hoffman's death, then you could make the argument that perhaps they're looking at something to the effect of second-degree manslaughter, or in common terms, involuntary manslaughter. A lot of it also depends upon their prior criminal history, Jenna, and whether they've been to prison before, or whether they have sales on their record. So I think a lot of it depends upon the ongoing investigation. But what I did want to add is that if the prosecutor in this case does go forward and adds more serious charges, I think if anything, it sends a message that drug dealers are not going to just face a punishment of just a slap on the wrist.
Right.
That perhaps if a drug dealer deals drugs and someone dies, that they could be looking at a life behind bars. I think that's a strong message.
You led us into a point to end on. I'm curious just quickly, both of your thoughts on this, on how law should be used in this way. Phil, I'll get your thoughts, and then Anna, yours. This, again, when we look at the national trend, states like Colorado, Minnesota, New Jersey, Ohio, where drug dealers have been charged with criminal negligent homicide, third-degree murder, manslaughter, reckless homicide as well. Is this the way that the law should be used, to come down on these drug dealers for, 25 years, a life sentence, Phil? Is that justice? Or is what we have currently in place, which is a few months behind bars in some of these cases for drug dealing, is that what it is? Because, again, it comes to that issue of personal responsibility. I wonder where we draw the line.
First off, the drug laws are very, very high, and it's likely that a trafficking charge could then give them 30 years in prison. But to answer your first point, the defense attorney in me says no. The individual who is buying these illegal drugs, they're dealing with the underbelly of society. They have a personal responsibility. And just because this tragic incident happened to Philip Seymour Hoffman does not mean that he shouldn't have to bear that responsibility. And I do not think that the drug dealer who's already committing this activity, there's a crime for that. It's called possession, sale, and distribution. And to do that leap to a homicide or a manslaughter is just not reasonable.
Anna, your thoughts quickly?
Yeah, I agree with Phil in that regard. I'm a defense attorney too, so I understand that there's a certain level of accountability. But I also would think that it depends upon a fact-by-fact basis and what the drug dealers knew and whether their actions were reckless. I don't think it's as easy as just saying the person's responsible, the addict's accountable, and therefore no one else is responsible. I think it really is fact-intensive, and it depends upon the facts, Jenna.
And you leave us at a good place because, again, we don't have the facts yet that tie these drug dealers specifically to what was in Philip Seymour Hoffman's apartment, and obviously still we don't know the cause of death. Great to have you both. Thank you very much. Anna, Phil, thank you.